Welcome to week 2 of the Broken Road Quilt Along. Last week we talked about fabric selection, so if you missed that, there'll be a link in the video description. Also, if you do not have your Broken Road pattern just yet, you can sign up for my Broken Road newsletter. It's a special newsletter just for people quilting along. If you sign up for that, you will instantly receive a code for an extra discount in my shop when you purchase either size of Broken Road or both. So Broken Road or Broken Road Mini. The link for signing up for that newsletter is again in the video description. This week we're talking about making the half square triangles. Depending on how you're making yours, you may be making them in 2 colors, or you may be making it very scrappy in multiple colors. If you're making it in 2 colors, then you'll need to make so many red and so many blue half square triangles, or whatever colors you substituted for the red and the blue in the pattern. Or you will need to make just so many multicolored half square triangles. So look in the pattern to figure out how many you need to make for the size Broken Road that you're making. Here's half square triangles. That's what we're making this week. And we're using the method in the pattern, which is the 2 at a time half square triangle method. You're probably very familiar with this method, but if you are not, there is a detailed video on my YouTube channel that I will link to below that steps you through all the process and does it very slowly. For the purpose of this video, I will step you through the process, but I'll do it much more quickly because my assumption is that you are already familiar with that method. To make half square triangles 2 at a time, you need 2 squares of fabric. You need your background and you need a colored square. The size square that you will need depends on which Broken Road quilt you're making. So again, read the instructions in the pattern. It will tell you what size square to use. Now the very first thing that we do is we draw a line down the middle of the lightest square, in this case the background square. Now you could just use a regular ruler and line it up with the corners and draw a line that way, or you can use this. This is a 1/4 inch seam marker by Fons & Porter, and they come in a set of 2. One's longer and one's smaller, and that's so you can use it on various size squares. And the way you use it is this yellow line, you line up from corner to corner, and then you draw on either side of the ruler, and that gets you the actual sewing lines. If you don't have one of these special little 1/4 inch seam markers, you just use a regular ruler, line it up, and draw a line from corner to corner. And then what you're going to be doing is sewing a 1/4 inch from that middle line. In this case, I have actually marked the sewing lines. The advantage of marking the sewing lines is that your 1/4 inch doesn't have to be perfect, because what you're doing is you're sewing on a line. So as long as you can sew on the line, you're going to be exactly where you need to be as far as your 1/4 inch. If you don't have these special rulers and you mark only the diagonal from point to point, let me go ahead and do that so you know what I mean. If you only mark this center line, then you'll be sewing a 1/4 inch to either side of it, so your 1/4 inch kind of needs to be pretty good. If your 1/4 inch isn't really that good, and you want to have a little bit of extra fudge factor, you can cut your squares slightly larger. And to figure out how large to cut your squares, I have a special half square triangle cutting guide that you can download and use that to convert the size squares indicated in the pattern to squares that are just slightly bigger, so that you'll have more wiggle room for getting your final half square triangles to come out the right size. So now that I've drawn my line, the next thing I do is I put right sides together. Now that's going to look a little weird here because I'm using batiks, so on batiks both sides look the same. But let's pretend that these are the right sides and we're putting them together. Then all you do is pin, or not. Some people don't like pin, but I do pin because these things tend to shift. So I like to have them stabilized. And then we just take it to the sewing machine and we sew 1/4 inch from this middle line, or in this case, we sew exactly on the lines we've marked. So now that we have our lines marked and we've pinned, we're ready to go to the next step, which is to sew either 1/4 inch from the middle line or on the lines that we've marked. I've already sewn one. In this case, I sewed on the lines that I'd marked. And now the next step is to cut it apart. So you basically cut on the line you mark that diagonal, or basically from corner to corner. Just going to cut it in half. It doesn't have to be that accurate because if you're inaccurate, it just affects the seam allowance, but it doesn't affect the final product. So you cut it in half. Then it's time to press. Okay, so you can press to one side if you want to the dark. And if you do that, I will finger press if that's what I'm going to do. And then I will press downwards with an iron. In this case, I happen to like to press open. So I just start the process with my finger. Get my iron over here. And then once I've pressed it, press it flat, press it from the front, and then I like to put the clapper on it, and that helps really press that seam flat. Once you're done pressing, it's time to trim. Now you will trim to the size indicated in the pattern, and the way you trim is you just need any kind of ruler that has a 45-degree line, so a nice square ruler. You take the 45-degree line and you lay it on the diagonal of the half square triangle, and then you're going to trim to size. In this case, I'm going to trim to 3.5 inches. So I will trim that side. And I have a rotating cutting mat. That I find is a nice, safe way to trim so that you're not cutting across yourself like this. You just really don't want to do that because guess what's over here? That's my other hand. I don't want to injure it. So I use a rotating cutting mat. Once you trim the two sides, you simply turn it around. Place your ruler, again, the 45-degree line on the diagonal, and this line and this line on the measurement that I'm trimming to, so in this case the 3.5 inch line, those are the freshly cut sides. Now I just have to trim these two sides. So I trim that side, and I rotate and trim that side. So you do that for the number of half square triangles that it says to make in the pattern based on the size that you're making. Now, when you're trimming these, you're trimming all four sides, so it can be time consuming. There are some tricks to save some time. For example, let's take the other triangle that we have here. And if you can get a specialty ruler known as the Quilt in a Day triangle square up ruler, and they come in various sizes. The 6.5 inch size would be more than big enough for any of the triangles that you're using in Broken Road, so that's fine. So the way it works is I'm going to, well, I guess I could do it like this. I take the measurement that I'm trimming to, which in this case is 3.5. I lay that on the seam allowance and I center it. So I'm trying to get this centering to go right up the point there. And then notice that it's just slightly bigger on two sides. So I'm going to trim this side and rotate and trim that side. So where you save time is that you were trimming two sides. Then what happens is you press, and I've got my triangle here. So all I have to do is press that, and it will, all four sides will be trimmed to the proper size. So because it was still folded in half, as I was trimming two sides, four sides at once. Now, once you have it pressed, again, I happen to like to press open. Next thing would be to measure, and we'll see that there you go, that it's been trimmed to the right. It's the right size there. So it's currently the right size. However, the dog ears are still there. So as a trick, as you're trimming, remember we trimmed by putting the 3.5 inch line right on the seam. So to get rid of the dog ears, all you got to do is turn this upside down, put the 3.5 inch mark on the seam again, and center it down here, put the seam allowance right there. Move that up so you can see. Okay, so we're putting the seam, the 3.5 inch mark right here, and then we're centering it at the point. And then you'll notice there's two little triangles that hang out. Those are the dog ears. So you trim that one. And turn it around. Trim that one. Now, I no longer have dog ears. And then when I go to press, it'll be a perfect half square triangle trimmed to size and without the dog ears. So personally, these rulers are worth it. But yeah, you can do what you want. You just need to make them two at a time and then trim them up to size. If in the pattern, it shows you how to make, or how much you would need to cut if you're gonna use AccuQuilt to cut out your quilt. I highly recommend AccuQuilt. I use it all the time, as you can see right back there. And in my patterns, wherever I can, I include additional yardage information, because sometimes I will tell you truth here, it will take a little bit more fabric typically to cut out a quilt using AccuQuilt. So in my patterns, I will tell you how much extra yardage or fat quarters or fat eighths or whatever that you'll need to cut out Broken Road. I also tell you what size strip you'll need to cut, and then how many triangles you need to end up with, because each of the half square triangle dies throughout AccuQuilt's die cutting system, they typically cut out 2 triangles at a time, but sometimes they cut out 4, sometimes they cut out 8. It just depends. So I just tell you how many total triangles you need to have, so you can figure out how many times you need to run it through the die to end up with that many. Now, the way it works with AccuQuilt is you need the half square triangle die. And in the pattern, it will tell you which one you need, but it's die number 5 in a particular cube set. The pattern will tell you which cube set you need for the Broken Road that you're making. Then you lay the fabric, and on, again, you're cutting a strip and you're folding it back and forth up to 6 times and running this through the die cutter, and then you're ending up with triangles. And what's lovely about the triangles, as you can see here, is that the dog ears are cut off. So to sew, you take the 2 triangles, you put them right sides together. Again, it's a little hard to tell because this is a batik, but let's pretend these are both the right sides. I'm putting them right sides together. And notice that you line up the little blunt corners there, where the dog ears have been cut off. Then you pin, if you're gonna pin. I typically do, but sometimes with AccuQuilt, these things, they just kind of static or whatever, they fit together and they stay together and they don't slip. So a lot of times I don't. And then you're gonna sew a 1/4 inch from this edge. You start right at this point and then sew down to the other point, and that's a 1/4 inch from this edge. And I have sewn one, and you just, again, the dog ears, because of the blunt edge, the dog ears are already gone. So you press open or press to the side, however you want. And then you can measure that to make sure it's the right size, but I'll tell you, with AccuQuilt, it basically comes out the right size without you having to trim or do anything. So not only does AccuQuilt make it faster to cut the thing out, but also it makes it faster on the other end, especially with half square triangles, because they just basically come out to be the right size. All you got to do is pin or not, and then press. And again, I tend to press open, but that's just me. I did want to say, when we were talking about the traditional way of making half square triangles, that remember we started off by marking the squares. And I mentioned that, you know, you can use one of these and mark the sewing lines if you want to. In my half square triangle 2 at a time video, which again I've linked to in the description, I show 2 additional ways that you can use to sew your 2 at a time half square triangles without marking. One of those ways involves this little gadget, which is diagonal seam tape, and it's worth its weight in gold. And you watch the video and you'll figure out why. But anyway, that's one way to save time, because you don't have to mark your half square triangles. The other way is by using something called a sewing laser. And I demonstrate that in the video as well. So if you're curious about either one of those 2 no-mark method for making half square triangles, just watch my video. So that's it for today. It's time to make a whole bunch of half square triangles, because that's basically what Broken Road is made of. Again, consult the pattern to find out what size squares you need, or if you're using AccuQuilt, what die you need and what size strip. And then also look in the pattern to find out what size you're trimming your finished half square triangles to, and how many you need of each color. The pattern will tell you everything you need. Next week, we will be joining the half square triangles with some squares to create 2 units, a unit 1 and a unit 2. So stay tuned for my tips on how to get those units to come out correctly. Until then, make sure that you are sharing your fabric choices and also your progress in the quilt along on social media. And in order to help everybody find that, make sure you use the hashtag # Broken Road QAL. And if you want me to see your post, and I hope you do, because I love them, just do @Inquiring Quilter, and that will tag me on social media and alert me that there is a post I need to go see. And I'll comment and heart your post, and it'll be fun. Another place in which you can share your fabrics and your progress is in my private Facebook group, which is called Quilting with Inquiring Quilter. So if you want to join that particular Facebook group. I will link below to it so that you can ask to join and share your progress. I am very excited because we do have a lot of people quilting along. I hope, again, that you're sharing what you're doing so that we can all get excited by your progress and the colors that you're using for Broken Road. And stay tuned next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel, for our next episode, which is on Units 1 and 2. Until then, I'll see you online.